Content warning. During Unqualified Filmbros Episode 9, From Hero to Zero, the panel discusses sexual violence and rape as portrayed in the 1977 film Saturday Night Fever and in the 1983 film Staying Alive. Viewer discretion is advised. Morning, everyone. Or afternoon, evening. I think I've used that one before. What's up? We are the Unqualified Filmbros with a podcast. We are back after our Hawkeye review last week. Hope you enjoyed that from the first two episodes. So here we're going to the opposite end of the entertainment spectrum as described by critics for the last 40 years. We got a little deviation from recent products to a movie that came out almost 40 years ago. We are talking about Sly Stallone's impressively terrible sequel to Saturday Night Fever, Staying Alive. What do you guys think of this one? I know a few of us had never seen Saturday Night Fever before, so we watched that and Staying Alive in conjunction over the last couple of days. So we all have very fresh impressions of both films, but especially Staying Alive.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't like the film itself, Saturday Night Fever, obviously a very well-known film. I think it's a great film. It certainly has a very, very well-known soundtrack. Probably like at least 3 songs on that soundtrack that appear in like the top 10 disco songs of all time.
Credit to the Bee Gees.
Very culturally important.
Made official by the National Archives.
Yeah,
it's included in that.
It actually was.
Wow.
For being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Yeah. Staying Alive is like it. I don't know. There's words like it. Saying that it's a drop in quality is like the biggest understatement I could possibly make
in the history of cinema.
It's not that it's low budget. It just feels low budget. It was actually pretty high budget because, you know, it was funded by Paramount. It's like an official sequel with John Travolta, with Sly Stallone. And somehow they managed to just like create this wonderful mess full of ridiculous lines that don't sound like they're said by humans.
Can I interject?
Yeah, go for it.
I gotta be honest, I kind of disagree to an extent.
Here we go again.
This film isn't good, but it's not like 0% on Rotten Tomatoes bad. Like, it's just kind of mediocre. Like, admittedly, like I'll say this.
To that end, Declan, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'll let you get back to it in just a second. But to that end, 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I've got it in my notes here, 23% on Metacritic, 4.7 out of 10 on IMDb, and 58% of Google users found this film enjoyable.
Like,
Declan, back to you.
That's a much better like metric for it than it's just mediocre. Like, it's just, I mean, okay, this is with the caveat that I didn't like Saturday Night Fever. Like, I didn't get it. I the ending genuinely like pissed me off by some of the content that it included. Not that it couldn't use the content, but
just the ending pissed you off based off of content. Nothing else in the film.
Yes, and also there was a lot of other moments that also did in fact make me mad. But it's like I didn't get Saturday Night Fever. I don't want to demonetize ourselves by saying precisely why, but I didn't like it. I don't get it. If someone explained to me,
demonetize, we have zero funding.
No, yeah, that's true. Okay, randomly including rape at the end and like explicit rape was just so unbelievably uncomfortable, and then to just dismiss it, I don't get it. And also, so it thus makes the facts that the characters are like actually racist and homophobic like bizarre and confusing. Again, I do not get it. If someone explained it to me, I'll
I've got to agree with you there, Declan.
Yeah,
that was something
yeah.
I pointed out to George when I was watching Saturday Night Fever this morning. I was like 15 minutes in, and they had already dropped so many slurs, so many slurs.
And it's not like the film is going out of its way to like show that they're bad people for doing it. It's just like, it's just
casual, and that's I think
part of their
the
lexicon.
That's part of and it's look. I don't like the argument that it was a different time. It was, but that doesn't make it any more of a comfortable viewing. And to your point about sexual assault, it was done in the presence of a main character, and sort of like after all of his use of these slurs, like he is kind of the one that stops it all, and yet it wasn't like this. I think it might have been meant to be this more heroic moment, but it definitely did not come off like that. It was
you see all of that character growth in Tony in Saturday Night Fever, and then in Staying Alive, he's just angry the entire movie, and that's his personality.
To be fair, it is limited character growth. I wouldn't say that he's some angel that is changed by the end of Saturday Night Fever. He's not, and I don't think he's supposed to be. That also I will add. He's not supposed to be this, redemptive character and have this arc that is now he's trying to make himself better. No, he's literally in Staying Alive stating to other people, I've matured, I've gotten better. I think he loses his accent as he moves into Manhattan, like his Brooklyn accent.
That was in Travolta's contract. He just didn't want to do the Brooklyn accent anymore.
Yeah, and they wrote it like it makes it. Yeah, sure, whatever. I don't care, but that was part of him. Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's some random fact that I didn't know. But that's part of where he came from, and that was part of the growth, but that wasn't really growth. I would argue.
So I'll interject first, because I do think that with Saturday Night Fever, like the racism and the bigotry is meant to be there, because that was a big part of, unfortunately, Italian Americans and Puerto Ricans, especially in New York. They explore that in West Side Story, obviously. I'm sure that there's probably still problems there, but it was very much like Italians were sort of xenophobic to anyone that was not Italian American. And at the same time, like Tony's friends who were all saying this stuff, even Tony says like some bad things, but it's like they're meant to be portrayed that way because they're all stupid, they're all ignorant, and at the end of the movie, I think it does a good job showing like he's not an angel, and he's not like suddenly a hero. I don't think it's meant to be a heroic moment. I think it's meant to be him suddenly becoming more conscious outside of like the consciousness of his neighborhood and just what he's grown up on. There's a lot of people who have been indoctrinated, like even his brother and stuff, who are just indoctrinated by a certain belief system that they don't even believe in.
Right.
So it's meant to be like including that with disco being the release where everyone can be equal,
But where was that release of dance in Staying Alive? Staying Alive, the focus of the movie, like Saturday Night Fever, you're seeing Tony in his world, but then, as you said, having that escape to the world of disco on his Saturday nights. The entire storyline of Staying Alive is he's trying to make it as a dancer, and dancing is his life, and then he's in this Broadway show with modern dance, and it's all dancing all the time. I mean, where you could find an identifiable plot, 3 minutes later it was broken up by more dancing. So,
and that's not to say that dancing can
purpose.
Advance a plot, but
right. It doesn't serve the same purpose in Staying Alive as it did in the first film.
No, I think that is a big reason. What they say, you know, he's angry and stuff, but no one really knows what he's angry about. I mean, it's a sequel to Saturday Night Fever, obviously. He'd probably be angry about some of the stuff at the end. But at the same time,
but they don't touch on any of that.
Yeah, he's just angry all the time. The only thing they touch on is how emotionally unavailable he is, apparently.
Yeah.
And how much sex he likes to have with multiple different people.
And that continues for the whole movie.
Yeah, it's so focused on the dance aspect too, and like him in general, that's why I like mention what I think like the main point of having all those terrible like side characters is to advance him in a way. Like he's the best guy. Like for most of the time, you know, yeah, they admit like, oh, he does some shitty things and stuff, but he's got it all. He's having a great time throughout the entire movie. Like he just gets his girlfriend back easily, really, really easily, like overnight easily.
Like I'll say that like I feel like again this is where I feel like the film was just mediocre, not like particularly egregious or anything like that. The main romance was like stupid, but it wasn't stupid in romance. The main romantic conflict in the film was stupid, but it wasn't stupid in like a crazy way. Like, oh man, they're on man, so Sly Stallone must have been on cocaine when he wrote this. No, it's just like, oh, Tony starts to see some British chick, and then
it was not the plot though.
And then he goes back to his girlfriend he was a dick to. It's like it's just like dull. It's not like crazy or what.
It's not the plot that makes it bad, Declan. It's the way the plot develops. All right, it's like that British woman you're talking about. We were talking about it before. She doesn't act like a human. There's not a single word she utters that I'm like, oh, that's a believable human phrase. I've seen that before.
Yeah, when we were talking about it before we started recording, one thing I do when I'm writing in my screenwriting classes and such.
George is in film school. For those of you that don't know, first week George is in film school.
That is the first time I have not been the one to bring that up.
I got you, buddy.
But when I'm writing, I want to make sure that, like Ben said, this is how people talk. And I mean, you can have a bad script and execute a movie well. One of my favorite movies of the last 10 years is this picture that Anna Kendrick and Sam Rockwell did. It's called Mr. Right. It's an action comedy. It's on Netflix. Highly recommend. 90 minutes. But it's just got a schlock script. And you can have a good movie based around a bad script. When you have every character, especially in a sequel like this one, when you have every character delivering lines that don't sound entirely human, I think is how Ben put it. Especially one of the main characters of the film. It detracts from it in such a way that the bad script not only hampers making it a better film, but it just adds to the growing list of what a disappointing result you have from the talent both in front of and behind the camera.
You know what I think I realized is sort of why the script didn't bother me as much. I think the main reason was because since I didn't like the characters in Saturday Night Fever at all, like I just never connected them with them or I never felt compelled by their motivations or their goals. Like I just the idea that like, oh, disco was Tony's release in Saturday Night Fever, like I just didn't think about that because again I didn't really like him as a person. So thus in Staying Alive, as people just do really weird stuff out of nowhere, it didn't like actually sit like wrong with me because it's like, oh, I already didn't particularly like these people.
There are like people
Also,
who are
why not? Why not do this stupid dance show that doesn't make any sense and would never be on Broadway?
Yeah.
Hey, modern dance in the early 80s, modern dance was very big on Broadway.
Yeah.
So
probably.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I think most of the people in Saturday Night Fever, like, even if they were, assholes, like, at least they made sense, like, as people. Like, okay, yes, you do this, stupid stuff. You use people for personal gain or whatever. But like, in Staying Alive, like, it wasn't like, yeah, she says like, oh, people use each other. It's like, it didn't even make logical sense as like I'm using you sort of way. Like, they go on a romantic date at first, and then they have a great time, and then all of a sudden she's just like, you have to leave. Okay.
But then at the same time, she's like, see you tomorrow.
Yeah, but then like sort of flirting, and this just goes on through the entire movie. We never get an answer as to what the hell's going on in her head, because
True.
I can't figure it out. That's not human, all right? That is not human at all. I mean, there's using someone, and then there's whatever the hell she was doing, which was just like more confusing than anything else.
Okay, that yeah, I see that. I see that. That is true. Her again, since okay. Here is the scene in Saturday Night Fever that made me feel like logic was out the window and thus didn't care that there was no logic in any character motivations in Staying Alive.
This is quite the setup.
It was the fucking Barracuda scene where they have this like actual brawl or something like that, and then they go to the hospital where this guy who we barely know is like, oh, it wasn't actually the Barracudas. Like, it felt like a scene out of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or something like that. How elaborate the brawl was, and then how it was entirely thrown out. So it's like, oh, okay, if we can have a scene as dumb as that, then like, I mean, yes, I know it's supposed
to be. But Declan, that makes sense for the purpose of the movie is to show how like selfish and inept all of them are, where they'll do all this stuff and they don't even care about their own friends. One of them could have died or something.
It didn't convey this theme, like it didn't show that it knew the characters were unlikable to me. It felt like they just had unlikable characters.
I think the movie
shows their impulsiveness, though, and I think that's part of it that Ben is trying to bring up. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ben, but
no, it's
they're dumb. Like, they're actively stupid and they make dumb decisions.
Tony's dumb too, and so
Tony is dumb. Like, his only sort of success is dancing. Like, that's his only thing that he's really good at. And so all of his friends and buddies, they're not good at anything.
Yeah.
True. Okay. That is true.
So like, I mean, it makes sense with their characters that they're so impulsive that they'd rush off to fight the Barracudas without even fully knowing the full story.
Even ask questions.
Yeah.
It's like on them too.
Yeah. I mean, you should immediately go to your friend's hospital bed, and then secondary, oh yeah, like, who actually beat you up is the second question you should be asking.
Yeah.
That's just like impulsive, like masculinity,
Yeah, like it's funny as we're talking about this, I feel like I'm realizing more about the movie, and I'm sort of like it. I don't know whether or not to hold this against the movie that I feel like it didn't work for me, because all of what you're saying makes sense, and it's just like, why didn't I notice this or feel this while actually watching the movie?
So this is how we reveal that Declan doesn't actually watch things he's supposed to watch, and we just tell him the entire plots.
They already know that from the Venom 2 episode.
There you go.
But
no, it's like everything you're saying is completely like, okay, I see this, but it's like these themes just maybe I was just again like just didn't, since I was already like held it against the movie, I didn't like think
holding everything against the movie.
I don't know. I'm just
show Hawkeye.
Declan was grumpy just like last week.
I don't know. It's like I think I was annoyed that like here was a movie that it is supposed to be a classic or whatever, but then I see it and didn't like it all that.
I mean, the soundtrack is also part of the reason.
I didn't really dislike it until the ending when I felt like it callously used rape for no reason. But
I think that like, I mean, it's like more controversial. Obviously, that scene is probably nobody batted an eye back then. Maybe. Well, I don't know. Rape scenes are still always pretty.
Like it's so explicit.
But, yeah, I mean, to your point, Ben. To your point, like it's not being brought up in conversations about what kinds of scenes are acceptable and like how do we handle scenes like this in the same way that I'm forgetting the movie, but I won't describe the full thing, but it has to do with butter. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. I'm forgetting the movie right now though. But that, I mean, there are some graphic scenes that depict sexual assault, and I'd say this is one of them.
Yeah.
West Side Story has sexual assault. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the conversations are changing on how we film these scenes, how actors are involved in the conversations surrounding them too.
I want to stress also just quick like principle statement. I am not against depictions of sexual assault on film. I just feel like I feel they should, given how terrible the subject matter is, it has to be approached right. And I felt that this film failed to approach the subject matter well. I felt like it did it in a very
I disagree because like there were multiple times. First of all, Tony, attempts to rape his dance partner, and then he, feels terrible and like apologizes to her, and then his the person he cared about, Annette, who was like in love with him, she was like, oh yeah, she wanted to be like used essentially, but then she didn't want to in the middle, and Tony at the beginning even was trying to like get her away, and then like in that car ride he like was very visibly uncomfortable. So I think that actually both of those scenes helped to like catapult him to the level, especially with the death at the end where he like just picks up and leaves like his family, his friends, because he realizes how terrible of an influence they are on him.
I think a lot of the themes that we saw in Saturday Night Fever, and again, it's really fresh in all of our minds because we all just watched that and Staying Alive. But Saturday Night Fever, you've got elements of West Side Story, you've got elements of Rebel Without a Cause, you've got elements of American Graffiti. These young, they're not these young kids. That's basically what they are, kids who don't know any better. This is how they've been raised, and this is their lives, and this is a day in the life is how I would describe it. Is we're seeing their life experiences play out over the course of one story. Staying Alive has none of that. There's no emotional maturity that can be taken away from it. There are no themes of intercultural relations. There's no coming of age-ness to it. It's just, how can we show where this character of Tony, and focus in on him, where can we show, or how can we show where he is 5 years later? And part of the way they do that, and I'm a little bit rambling here, but part of the way they do that is none of the characters are the same except for his mother. So you're putting this character in an entirely new cast. His romantic entanglements, his friendships, his work associates, they're all different from how they were in the first film. And there's no explanation for how he got here or what he's been up to. It's just he's been struggling, and this is what his life is like at the start of this movie. That's where we're going to go for the next 90 minutes. So the film just feels, and I said this again before we started recording, the film in that sense feels like the Die Hard franchise, because in those films, with the exception of a few characters, John McClane, is played by Bruce Willis, is in an entirely new cast of characters in each story he does. So I'm thrilled that it took just one sequel for them to realize that maybe this isn't a character we should be following for the next, 3 decades. But like, why did you need to follow him for another 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, the sequel is a really weird one where it feels very one note, whereas like there's a lot of different notes in Saturday Night Fever, obviously. He just sort of chronically, the movie starts out and ends with him pretty much having emotional relationship problems. Like he's in this relationship, he can't help but like, keep his pants on essentially. And he does that through the entire movie until he loses his girlfriend. And he's like, oh, I really need you. And they seemingly end up together after he keep his pants on for one night. She's like, oh yeah, clearly he's changed. But at the same time, how in the world is that where you are? I mean, I guess he didn't rape anyone, sure. That's improvement. But like he keeps talking like, oh, I've matured and everything. But like he should have actually had more maturity. And he doesn't even mature throughout the movie. Like I feel like he doesn't.
He's the same character at the beginning and the end.
It's the same character. Oh, wow, he kept his pants on literally for one performance. That's amazing. Good job.
And even then, he still gets and then gets scratched, but then no one just
also kisses her on that. Like, but he didn't go, with her at the end. He ended up in the street.
None of the stakes of that last performance, like in Saturday Night Fever, you feel the stakes of the final, the competition. You want to win this money. It's for, pride in your friends, pride in yourself. The stakes feel earned throughout the entire film.
He didn't even seem to care about the Broadway performance. It's like, who cares, man? Who cares?
Well, Ben, that's something you were saying earlier, in that, the director replaces his lead actor, or his lead dancer rather, with Tony because he didn't get the moves right or he wasn't good enough. And then Tony does the moves. He gets it wrong, just like the other guy. And then he storms out when he's not good enough. And the director's like, you need to put your mind to this. I'm going to give you a motivational speech and you're going to be the star of this Broadway show, even though you have no experience.
So that Black Swan could run. No, that's not actually true.
I'm putting that in the description.
I mean, George, that's a really interesting point. I was thinking about that scene in Whiplash, where J.K. Simmons' character tests the musicians, and it ends with him saying, "Not knowing that you didn't mess up is worse than you knowing and calling yourself out," or something like that.
I love Whiplash,
and that's kind of the same energy that I got from that scene where he storms out. And, he gets the motivational speech or whatever, but it's because he recognized that there was something wrong rather than letting something go wrong and sort of saying, oh, I don't really care, or, I'm not going to address it.
One thing I also do just have to bring up, I will say that this, and I don't want to be dismissive of Sylvester Stallone's work as a director.
We haven't even talked about him as a director yet, so please go ahead.
He has won Oscars, mostly thanks to Rocky, but nonetheless, that's not nothing. He is a talented person. So
good filmmaker.
Yeah. So his work here wasn't very good. There's a bizarrely high reliance on montage to tell the story, and
the dance montages were awful.
I will say, as a writer, writing montages is so much fun.
Oh yeah,
it's so
montage
fun.
5 minutes.
It fills screen time.
Like
a little too much in this film, though. I agree.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and also it's a weird decision to actually show so much of Satan's Alley as a performance.
It was the last 20 minutes of the movie.
Like
a 90-minute movie. It's the last 20 minutes.
It's kind of it's kind of weird. Like it's like, wow, we're really seeing this show that makes no sense. It reminds me of there's this HBO movie. It's kind of a bit obscure. You might have heard of it. It's called Cradle Will Rock. It's about this obscure show from like the 30s. Long story about it, but basically the show itself, Cradle Will Rock, which was a real show, is only shown very briefly and like in snippets because the movie is about the lead up to the show.
For context, Declan and I were in a production of the show within that movie, The Cradle Will Rock, when we were in undergrad, and I played Declan's father in that film.
Oh my gosh, you did, right?
So that was. I'm not surprised to hear him bring that up because I also thought of that sort of comparison, but that's where he's getting this from.
Yeah. But my main point though is that the show within the film is incredibly condensed, and it only has a couple snippets. The Staying Alive is a bit like if they showed the entirety of the play Cradle Will Rock at the end of this movie Cradle Will Rock. You know, it's kind of a weird decision that may not have been entirely necessary and felt like it was just trying to again pad out screen time.
Yeah, I mean, I think again this movie was just like, first it would pad out the screen time, but also I think John Travolta just really wanted Tony to have a successful career, and it was written like that. I mean, it's literally written so that he cannot fail. Like Tony cannot fail, and it's actually comparing it to Saturday Night Fever. Like he doesn't get that at all. Like all the supporting characters, you know, he's got like a few that are like, you know, nice to him and mentor him, but a lot of them are just assholes to him. So
I will say
too, obviously
one element of Staying Alive that I feel, and I'm going to say it, improved upon Saturday Night Fever is that in Saturday Night Fever, you have probably halfway through the second act, so middle of the film, you have Tony do this intense, 3 or 4 minute disco dance by himself, center of the floor, and it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then the competition at the end of the film, or towards the end of the film, I felt like he was phoning it in, and maybe that's why he felt like the Puerto Rican opponents in that competition did a better job than him. But then in Staying Alive, everything builds up. You see him in these rehearsals, you see him teaching dance classes, and then at the end of the film, the second act of Satan's Alley, he has this solo dance opportunity again, and it's the best part of the film because it breaks down his character to its like central most core. He is dancing because of the situation he's in his life, and he's letting it out through dance. And that's not something we saw at all in the first hour and 25 minutes of the film, but then we get it for that last dance. And I think having that as a way of him finishing the film was better in Staying Alive than it had been in Saturday Night Fever, because there were all these other parts playing in Saturday Night Fever.
I agree with the dance, but at the same time, like it's just so one-sided for him. Like there's a lot of emotions in Saturday Night Fever, and again, it's like one note in Staying Alive. He's just angry. And what's he angry about? Because he had sex with a woman who wasn't his girlfriend, and she ended up wanting to use him. It's like, well, yeah, sure, but that's the whole movie. He's just angry about this.
Yeah.
So that's his release at the end, and it's a good release, but like the initial anger is so not believable at all.
Yeah.
That's what this film boils down to, is that none of it is believable. Yeah. As an audience member, you know Tony is going to win out in the end, And by winning out, the only way that this ties back to Saturday Night Fever is that he struts at the end, like he did at the beginning of the first film. Which, by the way, he left his girlfriend, he left everyone else involved in the production back at the stage, at the theater, and he just goes out and he's going to strut through Times Square by himself. Where does that come from?
And then the film has the audacity to end with a freeze frame. Like, are you...
Well, the first film ended with a freeze frame.
Yeah, true. Okay.
It was much more intimate, but...
But at least that was like... I mean, it was weird given that she just forgave a man and tried to rape her so quickly. But at least it was representative of something. There, it was literally just like that, you know. It was one of those freeze frames. It's just like bizarre and like
very High School Musical.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, final thoughts on Staying Alive and to a lesser extent Saturday Night Fever?
I actually thought about High School Musical a few times, Staying Alive. Where sometimes I was like, oh my God, this looks straight at the High School Musical. You would just like get angry and then, do a little dance, do a stance. You knew he was going to break out into something.
Ben's showing off the moves here.
It did have a few good songs by Frank Stallone, though. I was really digging the 80s.
Well, you got to talk about that rhythm guitarist.
Oh, yeah, the rhythm guitarist. That was actually just incredibly entertaining.
Yeah.
Every single thing he said. And then at the end where he's staring at him, George, maybe you can put in some clips of this guy.
I just said we don't have funding. I don't think I have enough money to pay for copyright infringement.
True.
You don't need copyright infringement. It's fair use.
Give it a try.
Wow, look at that clip. We sure are commenting on it.
The other one, though, at the end of the film, where the rhythm guitarist is with Jackie, and Tony's, like, oh yeah, she's in fine hands, she's in great hands, or whatever. The guy's like, oh, what are you, Allstate? Yeah, you want a disability? It was so the best and worst dialogue I've ever heard in a movie.
It was great bad dialogue.
Straight up terrible, and I was so loving it. I would say it's a terrible movie, but honestly, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the film because it was so bad.
It's one of those films that, you can say you watched it because you watched Saturday Night Fever. Yeah, it's bad. It fits the bill of movie. It's a way to fill 90 minutes of your time, but it's the enjoyment factor, as Ben said, is in the fact that it is not a good film.
Yeah. For me, Saturday Night Fever was a film that I did not work for me. I feel it failed at what it was trying to do, though it was trying to do something that is remarkable to itself. Staying Alive was just like whatever, and so because of that, it was like just fine. It didn't affect me at all because I had no connection with Saturday Night Fever, and thus its disgracing of its legacy just didn't bother me one bit. So
yet you hated the first episode of Hawkeye.
Yeah, that's true. Where's that come from? Anyway, no, but but still, since Saturday Night Fever didn't work for me, it made Staying Alive just feel like a mediocre.
Which one's a better movie, though, Declan?
What?
Which one's a better movie?
I mean, Staying Alive has actual filmmaking problems that make it objectively so. Even if I feel that Saturday Night Fever,
all right, so Saturday Night Fever
failures in thematic and story content, it's still objectively a better made film than Staying Alive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch it all the time, but I think it's a pretty good film. I fucking love the soundtrack.
Maybe one day I'll read like an essay that explains everything that Saturday Night Fever is going for in the entire history of the 1970s disco scene. I'll be like, oh,
I'm sorry.
Now I get it. Now it makes sense. Now all the racism and the sexism is now completely. Now the film is actually undermining its characters, and it's not just depicting them as that as a normal thing for people to do. You know, now I realize how the film says that those guys are bad. Great job, Saturday Night Fever.
I think.
What were the last 40 minutes to you? Were we not explaining that?
I want to stress. For me, it failed to achieve. To me, when Tony is talking to her after her assault, it feels like he's victim. It to me read like victim blaming and not like he's talking about himself. Again, I didn't get it.
Yeah, he's selfish. Like, I think you're expecting Tony to be a good person at the end, where it's like he's improving. He's there to like show how terrible everyone else is. But like this is an escape for him. He's getting better.
That this guy is like, it never actually like stopped and like made that clear for me. I feel like it felt like, oh, he's just a guy, you know. I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'll give my final thoughts and we can wrap this episode. But you know, I agree with what Declan was saying, but on the other hand, I don't think we need a roadmap to tell us that he's not a good guy. Like, that's what the entire 2 hours. It's a 2-hour movie, and for what reason?
Why is it 2 hours?
Like, it's a 2-hour movie that basically, you know, walks us through all of these not great people. Some of them are just straight up bad people that do awful things
and say awful things. And you know, yeah, sure, Tony is the one person that shows any amount of growth, even though that's a tiny little bit. But you know, that's part of the movie. That's part of it was what, the 70s or something? 80s? Yeah. So it's the 1970s in Brooklyn. Like, what else do you expect? Right? Like, I'm not expecting it to be some movie with, I don't know. I'm not even gonna try and think of an example, but it's not a movie with redeemable characters, and none of them are supposed to be at all. Tony's just supposed to be the best of the worst. I mean, he's not even that good.
It's like a mob movie, you know. There's a bunch of terrible characters, but some of them are like, "Oh, you just murdered that person for no reason. I at least murdered him because you owed me $20." You know, so it's like,
I don't know. For me, it's a little bit different than a mob movie, just because like these are supposed to be normal people, and you know,
I mean in the morality.
No, I know what you. I got it. I got you. But it still feels just a little bit different, just because of them being like people that we could relate to. Like, I don't think any of us could relate more to mobsters and their own morality as opposed to going to a dance club with your buddies on a Saturday.
The characters themselves are supposed to be relatable, but also not relatable at the
You know, the film was doing unlikable characters, and I wasn't expecting it to, and I should have been more willing to accept that it.
With Saturday Night Fever, you expect just like a bunch of fun guys dancing, but
I was expecting some sort of weird dance.
That's what Staying Alive is.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I was expecting something about dancing, so the fact that it was so unlikable, it caused me to turn away from the film, and I wasn't giving it the chance. So again, it didn't work for me, but that's more my fault than the film's fault. I wasn't expecting it to go in the direction, and I think I held that against the film. So maybe so my opinion might honestly be unfair.
Dancing is both a distraction. And I think this is my biggest take from the movie. Dancing in that movie is both a distraction for the main characters and the audience. You don't have to deal with what's going on in their like personal lives while they're out there on the dancing, while they're competing or whatever. It pays, you know, he shows some growth through some scenarios, but oftentimes it's just an escape. Whereas when he's not dancing, he has to deal with all his, his family, his friends, and just like terrible people around him. His father's not happy about him getting a raise. His mother's always criticized. Like everyone's just terrible to him, and he's terrible to pretty much everyone as well. Unless he's on the dance floor. He's kind of a gentleman on the dance floor. He even gives that a weird girl who keeps hugging him a dance.
My final thought on these two films is that, and this is going to be really boring for the conversation that we just had over the last 45 minutes, but the costumes in Saturday Night Fever are so much better than the costumes in Staying Alive.
The soundtrack is mild.
This classic suit looks weird in Staying Alive. Like,
it did. It looked really out of place, especially because it was like 1983, no longer 1970.
Maybe it was
just like that anymore.
Get out of here, 70s. We don't want you anymore.
That was also a big change, going from disco to random like 80s pop, very much like Flashdance, Footloose vibe. No longer disco at all. It's like barely present, and it's very weird, like complete change in a decade.
So you have our thoughts, quite a lot of them,
scattered
on Saturday Night Fever, obviously one of history's most iconic dance films, and Staying Alive, history's most iconic 0% score on Rotten Tomatoes. The oldest film on the list with 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. Maybe one of us one day will log a critic's review of the film and officially get it off the 0% list. I think Declan would be the one because he called it mediocre. So
to spite then. That's what I'll do.
the two movies, Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive, are both streaming on HBO Max right now. That's going to do it for this episode of Unqualified Film Bros. We're going to be back next week thinking about doing another special event episode, so stay tuned for that. We got the holidays coming up, and I've already started. Happy belated Thanksgiving, happy Hanukkah to everyone who celebrates.
Thank you.
There you go.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. But yeah, we're going to be back with more reviews, more fun and games. We'll see you next week.